Okay, and we are live for episode 218 of Trek Live. How you doing this morning, Dan?
Doing great. I think it's very fitting that around the new year everybody's reflecting on the past year and what the new year is about to come. So I think this is the perfect topic for today's talking about Star Trek.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I've been eagerly awaiting this conversation for a little while now. This was an exciting 2022 was an exciting year for Star Trek. Obviously, we had 51 episodes dropped in the calendar year. 51 episodes in 52 weeks across 5 different series. This is sort of the year that I think we've been waiting for in a lot of ways. This is sort of the promise that the powers that be sort of alluded to pretty early on in this new era of Trek, since it's been back in 2017, that there were going to be multiple shows and that conceivably we could get essentially a calendar full of a variety of new Star Trek. And it kind of, for the first time in a full calendar year, hit us in 2022. There were some double ups here and there, and that created some little mini hiatuses, but the numbers don't lie. There were 51 in 52 weeks, and that's a heck of an achievement. So, yeah, we're going to start 2023 off here on Trek Live by looking back at those 51 episodes and trying to think about our favorites, what maybe the high points were, maybe think about, which seasons of those shows that we maybe liked the most, and maybe liked the least. I don't want to do too much on the negative side of things. It's not what we do here. We're going to focus on what we love. But we'll touch on everything and think about the year that was.
Yeah, it's amazing to me that back in 2017, 2018, 2019, it was always we're working to have a full catalog through the calendar year on this new platform that we're developing. And I don't know if I would have believed it then, but it's amazing that it's come to fruition finally that we have all this Star Trek with on this new streaming service that we get to watch Trek all year. So
Yeah.
great.
It also kind of strikes me that like just a few years ago, 2015, 2016, pre-Discovery, there were 5 Star Trek shows like in the catalog, and there are 5 on TV right now. So it's pretty crazy. The first, whatever it was, 40 some years of Trek's history had the 5 shows over the course of those years, and there's 5 on right now. They doubled them in just a few years. So yeah, exciting times. I think we got to enjoy it while it's here and embrace the sort of peak that I think we're living through right now in terms of just output. And for those of us who like the new shows and are on board and excited for them, this is as good as it's going to get, I think, with having them all running and firing on all cylinders. So,
Yeah, and I think inevitably there will be spoilers talk for some of these shows. So if you're behind on Prodigy or you haven't seen one of these shows, definitely
tread carefully. Yeah.
come back here and watch this episode.
Yeah, for sure. But before we get into the topic of the day, it's been several weeks since we've been here on Trek Live. We took a little bit of a break for the holiday. We were here maybe the week or two before Christmas, and we were chugging through season 1 of TNG. I know we both finished season 1 of TNG. I haven't seen your rankings yet. I eagerly await them at some point soon. But what are your overall impressions, real quick? I mean, we've had whole episodes of Trek Live on TNG season 1 in our back catalog, so we've covered our previous thoughts on it. But coming out of this rewatch, like, where are you right now in TNG, and how do you feel about the end of season 1, beginning of season 2, and kind of where things sit right now?
I'm kind of in the middle of the. Let me check exactly which episode I'm on, but yeah, I'm kind of in the middle of season 2 currently. No, it's been good. It's always really. It feels a little bit of work to get through at least the first season. I think there's definitely some really tough runs that you go through in the first season. I think of any of these kind of Permanent era Star Trek shows, but particularly the this one Next Generation, it feels like season one is like almost a TNG light.
TOS light.
TOS light. Once you get to season two, I think the tone changes a little bit. The actors feel more comfortable in their roles. We get to switch up with Pulaski in season two, which I'm really enjoying that. But
Cool.
yeah, it's been really nice to. I just watched the Royale. Contagion's right after that. A Matter of Honor was really good. A Measure of a Man is an all-timer always. So I mean, I think you get some consistency back in season two. You start to hit some really good episodes.
Yeah, I agree. I'm kind of right in the same general area you are. You're a little ahead of me. I just watched The Dauphin was my last one. So coming up on Contagion. Measure of a Man, like you said, is a classic that holds up. I think for me every time. Matter of Honor, I think, is great. I also enjoy Pulaski. I think she brings a little bit of a different element. I think the common criticism of her, what you typically would hear in Star Trek circles for people that aren't a fan of Pulaski, would be that it's sort of a McCoy rehash. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think there's a difference there. And I think we've talked about it before. Pulaski has a nice little arc that spans that season. I enjoy her. I think the actress is really good. She brings a kind of just a different flavor. She's older. She's more seasoned. I think she, especially at this point of TNG, brings just a different voice to the cast that I think is nice for a season. I'm glad Dr. Crusher comes back. I love Dr. Crusher, but I do enjoy Dr. Pulaski as well. But yeah, I mean, I would agree with everything you said. Season 2 of TNG is a step forward for the show. I think it feels more confident. I think the episodes are typically a little less shaky. They definitely, I think, are chasing the TOS tail a little less, even in an episode like Unnatural Selection, which, on one hand, you could say they were kind of rehashing the Deadly Years. It's a pretty direct lift of a premise. But I think the episode does enough different things with it and creates different situations and emphasizes Dr. Pulaski kind of in a singular way. It's sort of it's very, very focused on her approach and her mentality in a way that the Deadly Years kind of isn't like a singular look at any kind of one character. It's a kind of broader story that's looking at the various characters aging. If anything, it's a Kirk episode. I think it focuses most on him.
Yeah.
But we're using it as a kind of vehicle to get to know Pulaski a little bit, and I think it's different enough than its similar counterpart in the original series, which I don't know would have been the case if they would have done that in season 1. It just seems like the trend in early season 1 especially was aiming more for that TOS sweet spot. So I'm really enjoying it. I'm getting it's been slow going these last couple weekends just with life and being busy. I haven't watched a ton, but I'm chugging along and looking forward to getting into the back half of the season. We have Jeff in the room who just dropped his top 10 list. He shared his on Twitter as well. Quite a few folks did. I posted a question asking folks to share their I didn't ask for top 10s necessarily or just whatever you have. Like if you have a single favorite, a couple, a top 10. I wanted to see all of it. Jeff was one of the handful of folks who responded and gave some feedback and posted it here in the chat for us to kind of look at too. And we'll definitely do that. Anybody else that happens to stumble in here and check this out, we'd love to hear your favorites, whether it's in the live chat below or to the side, I guess, or in the comment section if you find this video after the fact, or over on Twitter, or like we say at the end of every show, the conversation doesn't have to stop here. We're definitely eager to see all people's choices for favorite episodes of the year. But I think we should just kind of get into it. I have a little alternate screen here I'm going to put up for those watching. It's going to just kind of be a board of all the episode titles from the 5 shows that aired in 2022. And just for people's reference to kind of follow along. And I'll ask you first, Dan. Like, do you have a singular favorite? Do you have a number one that you would point to? Is it more kind of broad list that you kind of have in mind? Like, what do you have?
I brought a top six, but
top six. Okay,
I can definitely kind of scramble a little bit.
No.
Top 10 if we want to put a definitely number on it. I appreciate Jeff bringing 10 episodes. That's pretty good. But yeah, my favorite. I think I'll just stick to my guns here. It's a Quality of Mercy.
Yeah.
And even bigger than that, I feel like this is my favorite season of 2022.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of unfair because this is the first season. A first season of any show is always how it has always been pretty good, at least if the track record goes. So yeah, that's kind of a little taste of kind of what's to come in my rankings with this top six that I have.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Quality of Mercy. It's so good. It's I don't know. It's doing what this new era of Trek has done so great all along. It's like taking an old episode and an old idea and kind of changing it, and then when you watch that original episode that is kind of based on it, it just changes your perspective on that as well. It's just so good. So that's my number one.
It's my number one too. It's my favorite episode of 2022. I kind of felt it as it was happening in real time. I remember watching it for the first time, and it wasn't even over yet. And I wanted to start it over and just kind of like do it again before it was even over for the first time. Yeah, I agree. I think it does a lot of things at once. I mean, it's got it's kind of delivering on the whole Pike thing that harkens all the way back to the menagerie. Like it's juggling a lot. It's got foresight that we've had as an audience about where Pike ends up in mind. Because of Discovery, Pike knows about his future and is kind of that's what's kind of driving him all season long. Kind of having an insight into his fate and how to reckon with that and move forward with life, kind of with the idea that there is an end coming of sorts. But it's also furthering, I think, the story of this show independently too. Like, I think the way that it has its kind of a beating emotional heart rooted in Pike's relationship with Spock, as we've seen, especially Strange New Worlds, 10 episodes develop that relationship, is what I think makes it as successful as it is in my mind. I think that last scene with Pike and Spock in Pike's ready room is sort of the sort of final nail in the coffin for me. That that's the one, and that's mostly rooted in like Strange New Worlds' work. Not, I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, it'd be easy to cite this episode as great because it harkens back to Balance of Terror and pays off things from Discovery, and that it's doing all these like broad stuff. But I think as a season finale, delivering on things that have been built over the course of this season of this show, it's extremely successful too. So I think it's the one that had the biggest, or maybe the smallest target in terms of difficulty level to sort of deliver on, all the things that needed to be paid off. And I think they nailed it. There's a lot of, it's just a lot. I mean, Paul Wesley as Kirk is an interesting talking point that people are going to have different opinions on. I am in favor. This is the episode that I have definitely watched the most in 2022. This is the one that I can throw on like a record and just kind of play in the background while I'm doing other things and listen to. It's kind of gotten to that point where I can kind of follow along just by hearing it, maybe even from another room. And I've grown to really like his performance as Kirk. It's very different. He's not William Shatner, but he's also not Captain Kirk that we know in TOS yet. This is a different, different timeline. This is a different series of events have led to Kirk's appearance here, and he's a different guy. with different relationships. Yeah, so that'd be my number one. Strange New World season 1 is my favorite season as well, so we have another point of agreement there. I think as a general whole, I think it was the most successful, driven largely by, because of the way I tend to do it. I do letter grades and try to measure my thoughts through that process. And while I think Strange New World season 1's first half is better than its second, in terms of like general consistency, there isn't an episode within that season that really drags that grade point average down for me. There's not something that really misses. There are episodes that are more middle of the road for me, maybe not personal favorites, but I wouldn't go like wholeheartedly thumbs down on any of them, and I think that's the reason that it would be my favorite. It doesn't have stinkers the way that some of the other seasons might have from my personal perspective. What kind of chugging along on your top 6? Like, I don't know, do you want to go sort of one at a time? Do you just want to name a couple of them? Like, what do you?
Yeah, so number 2 is Spock Amok. And then number 3 is actually Time Amok, and I really, that's one of my favorite picks in this list, because I think the start of Prodigy, I wasn't expecting to really like it. It was a kid show and all these things, but I really enjoyed that episode. I really loved how they laid out this really big sci-fi concept, and were able to work through it. So I like that one. For Crisis Point 2, had to give some love to the Lower Decks.
Sure.
And then maybe this is where we kind of stop at the talking point. But 5, I'm going to go the Stargazer. There are some really cool moments, really big Star Trek stuff that, like, I'd never think I'd see on screen again. So yeah, I wanted to kind of spread the love here a little bit with some of my picks. So yeah, that's my top 5, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we definitely have some crossover there. All 5 of them are in my top 10 that I kind of prepped. I think I love that the Amoks are your 2 and 3, Spock and Time. Time Amok is the episode, I think. I don't have the complete statistics jotted down because I kind of got away from tracking every single list that came in. But Time Amok got picked a lot by people. That gets cited an awful lot, and I think is maybe an early favorite for like the sort of maybe consensus pick for favorite episode of season 1 of Prodigy. It just seems like, I mean, the finale certainly is often cited, but Time Amok is a really reliable placement on these lists as I've seen them come in. And I think you're right. I think to me the hallmark of that is that it takes that kind of complicated, time warp kind of time anomaly idea that Star Trek does often. It's actually kind of a more complicated one to frame to the audience, like what is happening, and it's a kid show, and they do a really nice job of making it make sense and having it be cohesive and easy to follow, and satisfying for everybody to watch. And I think that's no small feat. So I think that is, I mean, the second half of the first season, because they broke it up so many times. The episodes on the first chunk of that list, Kobayashi through A Moral Star Part 2, that was January of 2022, those 5 episodes. That to me is kind of the period that I became completely sold on Prodigy. I think that's where I was like, yep, this is going to work. This is really good. And Time Amok, I think, is the high point of that. Kobayashi's really great too. But I think the reason I love Time Amok is, again, like Kobayashi's, while it's great and it's nostalgic and it's a really loving tribute to some actors and characters that are no longer with us. Michelle Nichols was still alive when that episode was produced and aired, but she passed in 2022. She's in that episode. Renee Auberjonois as Odo, James Doohan as Scotty, Nimoy. Like they're really loving stuff in that. But Time and Mock is like completely Prodigy. Like it doesn't have to rely on those callbacks. So I think I give it the edge there on that front. Spock and Mock is an episode. If I had to pick one that I've grown on the most over the course of the year, it's that one. That when I go back and I watch that again, it's so consistent thematically. Like it's so clearly about perspective and like seeing things from another point of view. And that episode is so like it's easy to think of it as it's Spock and T'Pring with the body swap thing, but it's Una and it's La'an with the young officers doing the Enterprise bingo. It's the aliens negotiating with Pike. It's all of it. It's everything happening in it is about that thematic consistency with seeing things from another's point of view, and I think it's really really good at that. And it's teeing up things that are going to get paid off way down the road in the original series, and with Spock and T'Pring's relationship. So it's just really doing the stuff that Strange New Worlds was built to do really really well. So that's a big favorite of mine that I think is going to be. Last night on Trek After Dark, we talked a lot about certain things that history and time might be really kind to and might not be. I think Spock and Mock is going to be an episode that time's going to be really kind to that. I think because it's fun to watch, it's rewatchable, it's pleasant to put on because it's lighter and it's not super heavy and serious. There's not a lot of great dramatic tension going on. It's kind of a laissez-faire, laid-back, relaxing outing, and I think that really helps it in terms of rewatchability. And,
yeah, and Strange New Worlds is going to be more because it's so episodic. It will be a little bit more rewatchable in the frame that you can just pluck an episode and kind of just watch it. Whereas like Picard or even sometimes back half of Prodigy, it's kind of hard to just
pop an episode out. Yeah. The Stargazer's another one. Full disclosure, and maybe to endorse our Discord server, we had a Trek After Dark last night, as I kind of just mentioned. We had a casual hangout with a bunch of people, and we talked a lot about Star Trek Picard season 2. And the Stargazer, which you picked, is definitely high up on my list. That's one of the few A's I gave this year as like an all-timer great episode of Star Trek. I think that season kicks extraordinarily well. It's a difficult season to unpack with a lot of complicated feelings, but it certainly starts off with a ton of potential. Gets the pieces moving really well. My favorite moment in that, and one of my favorite moments of 2022. I mentioned this last night on the hangout, but the Borg ship coming through the anomaly, saying Picard in the Borg voice with Picard and Seven standing next to each other. That ship is Borg. That's like a great Star Trek moment for me, seeing those two characters in that situation and how subtle it was and how deep we know their connection kind of goes because of that shared history with the Borg. I think it's underplayed and quiet, but lands a big punch. Penance is another one that's on my list that I think is really great. And from Star Trek Picard season 2, the second episode, that episode relies really heavily on John Delancey. That the first 5 to I don't know how many minutes it is. I'd say 5-10. The opening of that episode is kind of a two-man show with Patrick Stewart and John Delancey just kind of going at it. And I think that's some of my favorite stuff in Star Trek in 2022 as well, when those two actors are back on screen together. And I think Penance is the height of that, where the drama is at its peak and the sort of excitement of everything to come is still there. And it's also, I think, the tension of the situation in that being in this alternate universe. I think it's the best Mirror Universe episode since Mirror Mirror. That's not being a mirror. Right, exactly. It achieves what Mirror Mirror was able to achieve with really creating a scary situation and putting these characters in a position where they have to be really smart and work together to survive and get out of there without tipping their hand that they're not from there, because nothing good is going to happen from that disclosure. They have to kind of fly under the radar as best they can, and I think they are really successful with creating, and almost because of what happens after and what happens before, that's kind of an episodic episode of Star Trek. I mean, they're uniquely in that timeline, or in that alternate version of history in that one episode, pretty much. In the Stargazer, they're not there yet. In Assimilation, it starts there, but they leave quickly, and then it becomes 2022 Los Angeles. So as far as like rewatchable, easy to kind of throw on episodes, Penance is kind of up there for me.
Yeah, and I think in season 2, it's almost like Q feels a little bit dangerous again.
Yeah,
I feel like he's been like, through his time with Voyager and some of his later appearances on The Next Generation, he starts to feel more like a comic relief.
Yeah, softer.
That now in Picard he feels a little bit dangerous again, which he kind of did. He felt dangerous, in the pilot, but I feel like in this he kind of gets back to that type of feeling.
Yeah, he's kind of Farpoint and Q Who, scary Q. Like he's not messing around, and there's a danger to this situation that they're in. So yeah, there's that would be the Picard representation from my list. You mentioned Crisis Point Part 2. That's really great too. I think they found a really neat way to. It's really weird. It's a Crisis Point sequel in a lot of ways. It's kind of furthering some story ideas and the holodeck program and all this, but it's from Boimler's perspective, and I think it does a really cool job of like building off of the things that we know are what Boimler's all about, like his kind of how concerned he is with his place and where he's going to go in his career and what it all means, and the prestige that he wants through elevating in the ranks and all. And it's a really classic Star Trek story. It's like, what's the meaning of life? Like, what's the purpose of all this? Like, Star Trek characters come and go, and have these kind of realizations and challenges, whether it's like Cisco and Emissary or Picard in The Inner Light. Like these characters have these big moments where they kind of try to figure out like what is the point of all this, and Boimler gets it in Crisis Point Part 2. And in True Lower Decks Faction, it's funny, it's comedic, but it's also, there's like real power to it too. It's like there's a scene with George Takei as Sulu where he kind of realizes, okay, like I get it, and it feels big, it feels important. Like he has a turning point and can move forward through life with a different perspective and kind of mature a little bit. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do in season 4 and beyond with Boimler. Like how much does he change, if at all, from that experience? I think that's easily my favorite episode of season 3 of Lower Decks. Like I think that's the most consistently funny. I think it's got the best jokes. And do you know, like off the top of your head, like if you had to pick between the two Crisis Points, do you think? Do you have memory of?
That one's tough. I would probably say this one only just because it's most recent, and there's some really good Tindy stuff, and I also like.
Yeah.
I also really like that. You think that he feels, Boimler is the one that feels the most put together, almost, that he knows what he wants to do, and he knows what. And I think that I like that, like. Just one little thread can be pulled, and then he could, come crumbling down.
Yeah.
Just, I find that kind of flip flop, because you wouldn't expect Boimler to be the one to be having a crisis point. So, I really like that. Yeah,
a lot of good meta commentary on like consuming Star Trek for fans too, like watching the bad stuff. Where's the value in even like the bad movies or the bad episodes? Yeah. Really, really insightful, funny, smart jokes written by people that I think they get it, that keep coming back to this stuff the same way we do. So yeah, we have a lot of similarities. I think we picked the same favorite of all of the shows. We haven't talked about Discovery yet. Discovery is kind of odd because this is like half of a season. The rest of these, Prodigy too, has like a handful of episodes from its very opening that aren't included here because they aired in 2021. But the bulk of season 4 of Discovery aired at the end of 2021. So this is just like the last batch of episodes.
So my 6 would probably be Species 10C.
Okay.
At least for me.
Mm-hmm.
As far as Discovery goes, I really like it's kind of a classic kind of setup with classic Star Trek trope where a bunch of different people from a bunch of different backgrounds are trying to solve an issue, and yeah, that's Star Trek to me. So Species 10C would probably be my 6th. But yeah, just to give some Discovery some love.
Yeah, Species 10C is definitely on my list. That's easily my favorite of those 6 from Discovery. Whenever I watch that, I come away feeling like they made a bunch of folks standing like in a space trying to talk, trying to communicate as exciting as like the big action scenes that they typically deliver. Like trying to explain how do we tell them that we're not all one, like we're each individual people, and like trying to get down to the basics. I think they're really good at like not falling prey to shortcutting the communication. Like they have to get to the basics first. Like how do we tell them who we are? Like that there are like 310 of us or however many are on the ship, and we come from different places, and what the ship is. Like if you're dealing with something that's so different, we're like the ants going up to the people. Like how do you make contact? That I think they make that feel difficult, and they don't take any easy shortcuts with how to do that. And I just love that. I think that those scenes, like in the shuttle bay, looking out the hangar at the giant Species 10C, that they can't even really see, like they can't discern, they're too big to like, it's just like glowing lights and stuff. Really, really cool, big Star Trek stuff. Harkens back to Arrival, which is one of my favorite science fiction movies of the last handful of years. And yeah, so that's one of my favorite episodes of 2022, bar none. That's one of the A's that I gave. Another one that I find really rewatchable because of just how strong I think the dialogue is. It's another one I can just kind of listen to it. Like I don't even need to like completely be paying attention. I can just like kind of let that play and be pretty satisfied by it. So we match 5 out of 5 favorite episodes of each of these seasons. It sounds like, which is pretty cool. The rest of my top 10 kind of spanning off of what we've already kind of hit on here. Memento Mori, which Jeff I think has as his number 1. That's the Gorn battle, the kind of submarine ship battle episode of Strange New Worlds. Very, very good. Yeah, really exciting. I think their most successful space battle, I think, in New Trek, making it kind of harkening back to like the Star Trek II version of a space battle, where it's really tense and dramatic, and it's not. The tactics feel important, like where to position the ship and what to use that's around you, and it's another one that's very rewatchable as far as I'm concerned. Children of the Comet, I think, is excellent. I don't think it's actually on my top 10, but just from Strange New Worlds, it's another big favorite of mine. Reflections from Lower Decks, I think, is really good. I think that's my easy number 2 there. The Rutherford backstory, pretty satisfying.
Yeah, that'd probably be 7 for me. And then, of course, I like the hero, trust nothing. Go back to the station, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Reflections is probably definitely up there too. It's definitely a payoff from
a while,
like all the way probably back to season 1.
It's
really good.
Yeah, we were waiting a long time for that. That was a big hanging chad from kind of the pretty early days of the show. Like even when the show, I think before the show even came out, when we saw who Rutherford was and he had this equipment, like right out of the gate, people were like, "Well, what is that? Like, what's why? Like, did he hurt?
What's
Like,
his origin story?
yeah, why does he have this thing? And that they kind of left that hanging for 2.5 seasons, and I think they paid that off really well. And again, I think it does. It's a really classic Star Trek kind of conceit. He's got these two versions of himself living in each other, and in only Star Trek fashion, he finds himself like in his own head trying to battle it out with the two kind of versions of himself. That's such a it's a wacky idea on one hand, but it's kind of like what we do all the time anyway. Like it's real,
Yeah.
but it's sci-fi and it's execution, and Star Trek does that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because what's the TOS episode with two Kirks?
Yeah, Enemy Within.
Enemy Within. Then we get to see the Delta Flyer, of course.
Yes.
So that also is a point.
Right. Yeah. The one thing I noticed when I was putting these together, I gave the season finales, other than Equality and Mercy, I gave a B+ to all of them. Like, I like them all a lot in their own ways, but picking my favorite among them, like which season finale that's not Equality and Mercy is the kind of winner. Do you have a thought on which of those?
Even Farewell?
Yeah. Coming Home, Farewell, Stars at Night, Supernova. I gave all 4 of them. Personally, I gave them all B+. I don't know what you would do, but I guess my question to you would be, like, of those 4, do you have a preference? Because I'm not even sure I do yet. Like, I don't. They're really all close together because they're all similar. They're all wrapping up stories, and yeah, I don't know. My gut right now says Supernova is my favorite of the 4.
Yeah, that's what my gut says, because it does a lot to our crew, and there is some shakeup, obviously, but there's also some really good payoffs and really good, like, kind of tying this kind of really jumbled up season, with the break and everything. It really ties up everything in a nice little bow at the end. So I think it really does what I think a season finale should do. It should, get you excited for the next season, obviously, but it also should wrap up some of these very long storylines that, especially from Prodigy, it felt really long. So
yeah. It did feel really long because we talked a lot yesterday. These seasons are increasingly kind of becoming uniformly 10 episodes, right? With the exception of Prodigy, which is 20. One of the things we kind of touched on in the conversation we had last night on our Trek After Dark hangout was, kind of missing the days of longer seasons. And I think Prodigy is kind of maybe the testament to that a little bit. I think the ability for Prodigy to have some fluffer kinds of episodes that are maybe diverting away from the serialized story a little bit on occasion, to focus in on the characters and backstories and lighter moments, and just kind of being able to stretch out those developments and the character arcs, I think makes the end of Supernova really impactful. I think I do feel like having more time and more episodes made it more emotionally satisfying when it was wrapping up. I think we know that the reality of the production and the new day and the new way of doing things for TV shows such as these probably doesn't make it a likely outcome that we're going to get longer seasons. But I appreciate the Prodigy's was. I agree. Like I wish that they didn't break it up 3 times. I think that wasn't super helpful for the show. Maybe one break. I could see maybe splitting the first 10 and the second 10 by a little bit to break it up. But yeah.
I'll also mention the Stars at Night, only because, like, I feel like we were going through TOS at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was a little bit after it, and we had just watched the Ultimate Computer.
Yeah.
So I think it really hit a little bit harder than I think it normally would have if we had just watched the Ultimate Computer, which is kind of, The Stars at Night is kind of loosely based off of
Yeah.
the kind of elements in that. So I really did enjoy that one as well.
Yeah, he didn't learn his lesson from from Dr. Daystrom, Admiral Bonamigo. Yeah, I think the Stars and Nights are really strong. I think the emotional payoff of all the California classes showing up to kind of save the day is really cool. I think that was a nice little quiet arc that they built over the course of the season. Mining the mines is the episode when they're on the planet and they're competing with the other California class ship, and they have this. They kind of further establish that there's a rivalry between these ships, and the Cerritos doesn't quite know how they're perceived. Like they think they're pariahs, and it turns out they're like the heroes. To me, that is what tees up that ending in the Stars at Night when they all show up, which is really cool. Yeah. So, what about? We'll touch on this for a second because I know the answer. I think I know the answer, unless you pull out something random and unexpected. Do we have the same least favorite episode of this year?
Yes. Quickly, a mathematically perfect redemption is not mathematically perfect. It's my least favorite of this season, or 2022. Possibly, maybe ever, but I don't want to dwell on it too much because I know there are some people out there who like it, and that's perfectly okay. That's awesome. But yeah, that's probably my least favorite.
Me too. Definitely my least favorite of the year. I appreciate the attempt to completely break away from the format and do something ambitious. I think that works. And ironically, I think last season on Lower Decks, season 2, Wage Douche was a similar. If you think about the similarities between these two episodes, they both kind of break away from our crew a bit, spend time with newly introduced characters. Peanut Hamper's not newly introduced; she's pre-existing. She was in season 1, but Wage Douche kind of similarly breaks the format of the show and does something completely different. And in my mind, and I think in the minds of a lot of people, that's right at the top of Lower Decks' success stories. I think that's definitely my favorite episode of Lower Decks. It's one of my favorite episodes of Star Trek as a whole. I love that episode. Mathematically Perfect Redemption is sort of its, I think, maybe the next step in that evolution, and it is the opposite. It's at the bottom of my list. So I think that's maybe indicative of the risk reward of making that choice. You could really nail it and do something new and exciting and fresh. And if it doesn't work, it could turn into a big misfire. And I think unfortunately that was a big misfire. And on Trek After Dark last night, we had, I don't know, 7 or 8 different people, 9 people maybe over the course of the night kind of came and went. And we had pretty unified consensus, I think, on this one. I've been curious since it aired. Like, am I alone? Or are we alone? Like, how commonly thought of is that notion? Like, is a mathematically perfect redemption going to be kind of in the box with Sub Rosa and Threshold and Precious Cargo? Like, is it that? Is it going to be in the sort of maligned episodes that have their cult fans and will have a following and will probably, have even more of like a second life because of residing in that box? But is it that? Like, is it consensus enough to kind of put it there? And I'm thinking so. I think it kind of is emerging as kind of a candidate for that. And I think that's cool. I mean, there's almost 900 of these things, and kind of half the fun of it is, enjoying the full spectrum, the ones that work, the ones that don't. Kind of like Crisis Point was talking about, like, gotta love it all, even when it's not, even when it's not hitting. So, yeah. Any other thoughts? Any other favorite things, high points, as far as 2022 goes?
No, I don't think so. As far as the year goes as a whole, I think it was pretty strong. I think yeah, I don't know the exact percentage, but 1 out of 51 or how many episodes there were. Like that's a pretty good percentage of, I would say, quote unquote successes. I think we definitely got some seasons that weren't as good, and then some seasons that I think are definitely pretty strong. But I'm very excited for 2023 and what all that brings.
Which show are you most interested in seeing come back in 2023?
Strange New Worlds.
Cool. Yeah.
And I know a lot of people say Picard season 3 because the original cast is back, but I'm still,
pushing forward into Strange New Worlds. Cool. Yeah. No, I'm right there with you with being really excited there. I'm excited for all of it, as everybody can probably guess, but I'm definitely a Picard guy because of the TNG component of all that. But Strange New Worlds is, I mean, by the numbers, it is pretty far out ahead as my favorite batch of episodes of these 5. So I the one that I'm on the most basic level, like the happiest with and most excited to see continue as like a pick it up and keep going is Strange New Worlds. Picard, because we talked a lot about this too last night. Picard has kind of evolved into a show that's almost like 3 distinctive, like giant novels in the form of TV seasons, and not necessarily like a season 1 rolls into 2, rolls into 3. Like you kind of have to look at each season as almost like its own like little mini story. And so on that basis, season 3 feels more like a kind of another fresh start, like almost like another pilot coming. Because it's going to be, I think, so different from season 2, which was already so different from season 1. And so they feel a little different. Picard feels different than these other like continuations that we're going to get. But yeah, I would echo that. Jeff in the chat, to answer the question about the season finales outside of Quality of Mercy, picked Supernova as well. But he said his favorite moments would probably be from Farewell. I'm imagining the Picard and Q kind of wrap up scenes definitely loom large as big moments from this year as well. Definitely glad you mentioned that. We could go on for a long time and dive into deeper cut things. We could go with like guest performances, things like James Callis in Monster would come to mind for me. In that, I think some of the obviously bringing back of like if we went like nostalgia trips, going back to Deep Space Nine with the Now Visitor and Armin Shimmerman and Here All Trust Nothing would definitely call for some attention. Okana came back for a couple episodes of Prodigy. Like there were a lot of noteworthy things that we could touch on, but I really wanted to focus on like what stood out to us as like our favorite episodes, favorite little things. And I think we did that here. I do have a top 10 list that I'll be posting on Twitter that kind of sums up what we talked about here. No surprise if you watch this, it's going to be the same episodes that we just covered. But yeah. I think we'll leave it pretty much there. Really excited for 2023. I think all these shows are worthy and exciting, and I think they're all heading in the right direction. And can't wait to talk about it as it comes out.
Yep, you guys know the drill. The discussion does not have to stop here. Bill mentioned it. Twitter and our Discord server is also a great. I know Bill's going to be posting a lot on Twitter, but there's also some great discussion specifically for the new stuff, and there can be spoilers, in there, so it's a really nice resource to use, even if you don't want to get spoiled, and all good stuff.
Yeah. Yep. Thanks, Jeff, for hanging with us in the chat, sharing your list. Appreciate you throwing it in there and having it in the batch. Real quick, what I'll do before we wrap up, I did jot down the episodes that had the most mentions, kind of generally speaking, on Twitter. Again, kind kind of backing up what we had already talked about. There's no big surprise here. Memento Mori, Spock, Amok, Quality of Mercy, all three of them from Strange New Worlds got heavy mentions. Supernova parts 1 and 2 were often mentioned. Time Amok, Stargazer Penance, Coming Home from Discovery, which we didn't really cover specifically. The finale of season 4.
Yeah.
It was a leader. Reflections was often mentioned. Crisis Point Part 2. So we're all kind of on the same page here, and that kind of gives me some. I like finding the consensus. I enjoy kind of figuring out, which ones does the group kind of agree on as the best and maybe the weakest as well. And I think we're kind of this exercise and asking people to share their picks have kind of solidified some of those as like favorites among the fans. I think we're getting answers to some of those questions, like which of these really are like the group favorites, and they're the ones we talked about ourselves are pretty commonly picked. So, yeah. All right, so yeah, everything Dan said, our Discord server is a really cool place to be. If you are a Discord user and you're looking for a modest but active community to chat about Star Trek, you can shoot me a DM on Twitter at TrekFan4387. I'll get you an invite, get you on board. We have quarterly, as of right now, group hangouts that we call Trek After Dark. It's just a bunch of people hanging out, talking about mostly Star Trek, but anything that's on our minds. A more personal way to get to know us and others, people like Jeff in our chat right now. And then, of course, on Twitter, you can find both Dan and myself talking Star Trek all the time. So keep it going that way. All right. So we'll be back in 2 weeks. Not sure what the topic will be yet. Might be a rewatch recap. Might be something specific. Not totally sure yet.
Undervalued is my opinion.
Undervalued. Okay.
We'll talk about it.
All right. Okay. So 2 weeks from today, we'll be back. It sounded like probably talking about an undervalued episode of Star Trek. I have a feeling I might know what the episode might be, but I'll plug that until we confirm it. But stay tuned on Twitter and on Discord if you're there for final word on those things. So,
yep. Thanks everybody for watching. See you guys in 2 weeks.
Take care, everybody.